The Hole in the Ground is a really good film. It was a little slow to begin with, but I'd say it's worth persevering because after about halfway, maybe even a little earlier than that, it does become really great. This is a supernatural horror film from 2019. It's directed by Lee Cronin, and we have a cast including Seána Kerslake, James Cosmo, Katie Outinen, Simone, Kirby, Steve Wall, and various others. And this is about a family who move to a new location. And Chris, the son, played by James Quinn Markey, wanders off and then he comes back. And over time, his behaviour starts to change. And it's very atypical for the character. And it does intensify a little bit as the film progresses. I will say his behaviour could have been a little bit more shocking or a lot more intense. There are certainly moments, but I feel like a lot of the changes were quite subtle, which, yes, to begin with would make perfect sense as it escalates throughout the film, but his behaviour never quite reached a point that I wanted it to, for it to be really dramatic and suspenseful, but there are certainly identifiable changes there, and the big question is, what's causing these changes? And I'm not going to answer that. I mean, the title might potentially give a brief indication of what might be at play here, i.e. this hole in the ground, but I won't give away anything beyond that. It's a well-written story. As I said, it was a little slow to begin with, but it definitely picked up at a certain point. Yes, I would have liked it to have been a bit more dramatic and suspenseful, but there were certainly moments. It's quite an intense film at times, and I think Chris, as a character, is really great. I think James Quinn Markey gave a great performance, as did everybody. Visually, it's quite appealing. The camera work's good. I didn't make any notes about the music, which means that it's not annoying or jarring or anything, so that worked well. And ultimately, I thought it was a decent experience. It's not the most challenging watch, so if you're in the mood for a horror that's well written but not too intense, there are intense moments, but in general, the narrative's not overly intricate, then it could be a good one to go with. And I say that because as a horror fan, sometimes I want a horror film that isn't overly complicated. There are some fantastically scary horror films, but with the most tangled narratives that they're almost tedious to sit through because it's just so complicated. That's not the case here. Everything makes perfect sense within the context of the story. As I said, we have some great performances, very well written characters. It's not the heaviest watch, but it's still very enjoyable for the most part. And if you're in the mood for a horror film that's generally pretty good, but also a relatively easy watch, then I'd say The Hole in the Ground might be one that's worth checking out.